forward to the Select Committee hearings.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I only need make a brief contribution because this bill is such common sense, and the fact that it's being supported so widely across the Parliament indicates what a sound bill it is. Just to briefly comment on the contributions that have been made, it's not surprising that the media are openly speculating on Russell Norman as a Minister of Finance in an alternative government when you contrast the speeches that we've just heard from Clayton Cosgrove and from Russell Norman. That sort of nasty negativity that does not speak anything of the values or vision that Labor has, in contrast to, yes, a very different vision that the Greens have, a vision that I think would be a disaster for New Zealand, but at least we have some idea of what the Greens might stand for. Mr. Speaker, we need look no further than the social disaster that is unravelling in the southern parts of Europe and the fiscal crisis in the United States of America to recognise the importance of good fiscal policy to New Zealand's future. In my 23 years in this Parliament, I would say the single most important act that has changed the prospects for New Zealand was that 1993 Fiscal Responsibility Act. In the 20 years prior to that, New Zealand's books by both national and Labor governments were very poorly managed. In the 20 years since, New Zealand has moved from one of the worst performers in the OECD to one of the better performers. In typical Bill English style, though, this bill is about making those incremental improvements in that Act, and I want to comment on the three major ones. The first, fiscal policy has got to be better aligned with monetary policy. New Zealanders have so often been punished with high interest rates, not because the Reserve Bank is not doing its job in controlling inflation, but because governments have spent up big and there's been a high price for New Zealanders to pay for that. I say when I read Labor's big spending policies that one of the biggest losers will be those New Zealand families that are aspiring to own their own home because of the interest impact that those policies will have. Secondly, this bill makes good sense not to be just focused on the level of fiscal responsibility today, but looking out in the future. When we came to government in 2008, we were looking at a decade of deficits, and I will not be lectured by members opposite about fiscal discipline given the level of projected debt and spending that the Labor government had built into the bottom lines of New Zealand, that had sought ever-ballooning debt and deficits going out for 10 years, that has left the Minister of Finance, Bill English, with a nightmare. His career is going to have to spend the best part of it actually pulling back on those extravagant spending that occurred in the term of the last Labor government. And the third big change in this bill is in terms of focusing on the efficient and effective spending of public money. There are so many areas in which government money was poorly expended, and I really look forward to the discipline that these reforms will apply. Let me give you just one simple area in closing. I spent the best part of the last 3 years in trying to improve the solvency of ACC down to 45%. Members opposite laugh. 45% solvency. If it was an insurance company, they would literally be broke. And yet members opposite, we've improved it up to 75%. Judith Collins is doing a great job of continuing that work. We are determined as a government to get to 100% solvency. And what worries me, Mr. Speaker, is ACC's Labor's ACC spokesperson said they want to go back to pay as it goes. They want to go back to the sort of push the cost out into the future. And that sort of policy will be held into check by these sorts of provisions and will expose the fiscal nonsense of those sorts of changes that we would not support. Mr. Speaker, this is just part of the package of the sensible financial policies that this government is adopting that protects New Zealanders from the sort of loose fiscal policy that can cause so much social harm as we see in so many parts of the world, and I urge the House to support the bill.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take a call on the public finance fiscal responsibility